We will deal with that later. All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game from scratch using nothing. No libraries, no engines, just right on top of the OS, as low as we can possibly go. And again, this is just an educational program. We're basically trying to do everything that's involved in the actual execution of a game so that people can understand the complete technology behind them with no kind of hidden aspects, no misunderstandings, like really getting down into absolutely everything that makes a game tick. Because not only do I think that's important because, hey, the next generation of engine programmers are going to have to be able to do all that stuff, but also because even if you always intend on using engines or libraries, understanding how everything works in the full stack of a game really allows you to make better decisions, it allows you to debug things better, and it allows you to drop down and do low-level stuff in the cases where you actually need to in order to make new things for your game in the cases where existing things just don't work right or don't support the kind of things that you need. So pretty much, there's never really a bad time to learn more about low-level stuff because it can only really make you more powerful in everything that you do, no matter what level you do it at. And so, with that stated, we're going to do some stuff today to pick up on where we left off yesterday, where we were trying to basically put C into a position to be as easy to use as a scripting language in terms of turnaround time. So instead of having to go through a compile, debug, run cycle every time we want to change something in C, where you have to restart the app, we made something yesterday where we could just change the C code and it would automatically update in the game without having to close the game. And so we're going to do is we're going to work on that a little bit more today and perfect it to getting to the point where we can just live code C and have the game change right instantaneously as we change the C code. So if you are following along at home, if you have pre-ordered the game, you should have gotten an email with a link in it. That link always allows you to download the latest source code. It is one big zip file that has separate zips in it for every day. And as you can see here for the handy dandy counter, we are on day 22. So if you would like to follow along with us, unzip day 21, and you will have the exact same source setup as I have right now. So with that said, here we go. Now, a couple things happened yesterday. Basically, I was having trouble figuring out how to tell the compiler, no, really, we don't want an exe, we just want a DLL. But it turned out the only reason for that was because I was compiling in the build.bat, I was compiling trying to pass the /DLL to the linker, but it turns out if you're actually calling CL and not the linker, you have to pass this /LD switch. So it's just a compiler switch change that you have to do. So we did that yesterday, but what that means is that a couple of things that we did to try and get things to output a DLL are not actually necessary. So for example, at the bottom of handmade.cpp, I had inserted this DLL main, which is basically the place where when a DLL is loaded, Windows calls that back just to see if it needs to do anything. We don't need to do anything, but I checked to see if we had to put that in there. I don't think we actually need that anymore, so I'm just going to verify that we actually don't, and it looks like we don't. So then we have in our build directory, we still should be producing a DLL, and we are, not an exe. So basically, I just want to get rid of that code because it didn't need to be there, so there's no need for it. Other than that, we were in a pretty good position yesterday. I'm going to recap sort of where we were, just so you have a good understanding of what we're going to do in a second here. But basically where we'd gotten to is if we go into the build directory and we ran our game, right? And here's the game. We were now in a position where we could, if we wanted to, go into GNU Emacs or whatever editor you happen to be using at home. If I want to kind of make it so that I can see a little bit better, I'll make a little kind of shorter and squattier, if you will. Oops. Thank you, Windows, for correcting that. Of course, that's what I wanted you to do, was to make it the whole window size. So if I go in here now, while the game is running, we had actually gotten it to a point where I could go and change what it was doing, and it would update on the fly. So for example, if I wanted to change this from using green to putting green in the green slot to putting green in the red slot, I can do that. I can hit save, and then the game will periodically reload. Sorry, I have to build it first. So I build the game. When it actually finishes building, the game will then pick it up and change the color. But you'll notice there's a fair bit of lag there, right? When I hit it and I redo it, there's a fair bit of lag there. And the reason that there's lag is that our game is only actually checking to see if it needs to reload every so often. It's only checking about once every 2 seconds. So that's something we could fix and get it a little bit better. The other thing that we would like to fix at a bare minimum is that if we were running in the debugger, oops, that's no good. I keep forgetting that in fact, I should let's go ahead and close that and get that out of there. I was syncing the witness earlier today and don't want that getting snuck in here. This is not a witness coding session. This is a Handmade Hero coding session. So basically, if I was to run this in the debugger, right? So I run the same thing that we were running, but I run it under the debugger. If I was to go try to recompile, we ran into a problem, which is that Visual Studio, when I try to compile when the game is running, it can't actually compile because Visual Studio has locked the debug information file. And so the compiler is unable to actually do anything about that. It can't output a new one because it's trying to write it over the same place. And this is pretty bad because I would like to always be able to run the debugger. I don't want to have to stop using the debugger when we want to use our live code loading. So what I'd like to do is also figure out a way to get around that. So the first thing we're going to do is see, I don't actually know, this didn't used to be a problem. Visual Studio, like many Microsoft products, gets worse with every revision, and this is one of the ways that it got worse. Before, when you would unload a DLL, it would actually unload the PDB as well. And so I assumed that it would do that, and that all we'd have to do today is make sure that we actually do that. Like in the game, we would unload the DLL, it would unload the PDB, Visual Studio would stop locking the PDB for access so we could write to it, and then we would reload it and everything would be fine. But from looking on the web today, because I wanted to check to see if that was true still, it turns out that it does not look like it is true. It looks like Visual Studio now continues to lock the PDB even after you unload a DLL, even though it doesn't need the PDB anymore, it just keeps it locked. So we could go verify that that's true, or what we could do is try to change what we do a little bit to see if we can work around it. So one thing that I was thinking of, people were saying basically you have to timestamp the DLL and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if that's actually true. We can change, using a compiler option, we can change the name of the PDB that we're going to use. We can force it to output the PDB to a different file if we want to. I'm going to go ahead and look up that here. So if I Google for MSVC set name of PDB, there should be a thing which basically tells us a linker flag. Well, actually, it looks like a compiler flag, sorry. A compiler flag that basically allows us to pass the name that we want for that PDB. And so it's a /fd. So if I go in here and I say /fd, in theory, I should be able to, I don't know why I'm using slashes all of a sudden when I usually use dashes. Basically, I should be able to pass something else. So let's say I go ahead and pass some other thing here like foo.pdb. I should be able now to make it build a different PDB into the build directory. And let's see if that actually works. So I do not see a foo.pdb. Why do I not see a foo.pdb? That does not look like it worked, people. Does not look like it worked at all. Am I wrong? I do not think I am wrong. Let's delete all the PDBs and just double check. There we go. Yeah, so it's still going to handmade.pdb as far as I can tell, which looks like our -fd does not seem to have stuck. So I know this is yet another situation where names default to v. Oh, well, this is not. This is that secondary PDB, which is not the PDB that I actually wanted to rename. Is there another one that I can do that changes the other? Because remember, we actually stopped it from outputting that VC PDB one, the other type of PDB. We actually stopped it from doing that. So I don't know. Does the linker have a way that we can output the PDB and maybe change it there? Because there should be a way to do that. So let's take a look here. out/PDB alt path. I don't know if that's good. An alternate location for the program database file in a compiled binary file. Normally the linker records location of the PDB file in the binaries that it produces. You can use this option to provide a different path and file name for the PDB file. The information provided in PDB alt path does not change the location of the actual PDB file. But what does? PDB path. Is that right? Let's take a look here. Come on, MSDN, you can load it up. PDB path will search your computer along with the file path to debugger search for PDB. No, so I don't know. Let's see, does anyone on the stream know which is a way I can tell it to do that? Because last time I spent too long looking for compiler symbols, and To be honest with you, this is a lot of my life whenever I'm on Windows, is searching the Arcane documentation to try and find out how to just do something extremely simple, which is like set where this PDB goes. And a lot of times, something like what I just did, like exactly what just happened is what happens to me a lot of the time. I will go in, I'll find documentation that says, here is how you set where the PDB goes, I'll do it, and then it doesn't work. And of course, there's really no way that you can actually go in and do anything about that because you have like nothing to go on. Like you have no idea why it's deciding not to use the switch that you have specified. So again, excuse me, I'm not sure. So I'm going to see if I can just go ahead and set it in here on the linker. I don't know if this will work. /pdb. I don't know if /pdb actually supports arguments, but I'm going to go ahead and try it there. Because like I said, I just want to see if I can put it to a different file name and have that help us here. Let's see. So pdb : file name looks like that should do it. So I'll specify it here instead of there and see if that helps at all. I don't know. Maybe I need to specify it in both places. Let's find out. That looked like it worked. So apparently specifying it to the linker works, but specifying it to the compiler does not work. Is that true? So I deleted the PDBs. Let's compile it again. And let's see what it does. So that looks good. All right. So now we've just got the two PDBs. One for our Win32, which is fine because that never closes, and one for the game code, which goes into foo.pdb. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if we can just generate a different name for the PDB every time. So basically we'll do handmade underscore, I don't know, like there's probably, isn't there a date, a predefined thing for date or something like this? Let me see. In Windows, I think there is date. Yeah, so there's a predefined thing for date. So let me see if there's something that we can do here that would allow us to set the date to something that would be convenient to insert, because those slashes would not be a good thing, obviously, to put into a file name. But it would seem, oops, that would be fine. In fact, that would actually probably be fine. You know, we could just do something like handmade underscore time.pdb, and I don't know if that'll work. But it probably will. Let's take a look. Oh, no, that did not work. Program to error writing program file. So it doesn't like that name. Oh, because the colons. Yeah. So the colons won't work. So is there any way that I can actually make this do something that will be a good name? So let's take a look here. Bat file append time to name. Let's see. Let's take a look here. Stack Overflow, I don't think has redeemed itself its entire time, so this could be its big chance. All right, so there they've got a little syntax here that looks like there is a syntax for the time command. So that would suggest to me that we can do ms-dos time variable syntax. Is there a thing that would tell us what that was? And then we could take a look. Let's take a look. Date and time. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, so it looks like we can do some stuff that has to do with that. Oh, this doesn't look like a very concise way of doing that. So, all right, maybe we'll just do what it says in here. All right, so basically, we could use, wow, look at that. That is some crazy stuff. I didn't even know that I don't even know how to do a lot of this stuff in batch files. That looks like some crazy stuff. I don't even know. Look at this. That's crazy town. It's a little bit more crazy than I was hoping for. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. But let's take a look. So if we actually use this line here, right? Let's see what that actually equals when you echo it, and if that's something that we could use. I don't know if it is or not. That doesn't look promising. I wonder if we have to have command extensions enabled to actually use these things. I'm not actually sure. I am not actually sure. So again, this is all just really simple stuff. Like I am not a MS-DOS batch junkie or anything like that. But really all I want to do is make one of these that's sanitized so that I don't have to do anything fancier to get MSVC to stop locking our file. So I'm just going to make it output to a different PDB every time and hope that that fixes it. So if I want to do that, I just need a way to format the date in a way that isn't totally crazy. So let's see, replace. I guess the other thing I should check is to see whether this works in a batch file instead of, it's possible that the thing does work in a batch file or does work under the set command and doesn't work in other things. So let's try this as well and then see what test is set to. No, so it doesn't work there either. So I don't know, that could be, I'm not sure why they have that, and I'm not sure why they are able to do this or think that that works and we can't, right? But it could be, well, it looks like maybe it was just a typo in the previous one. All right, so that's fine for our purposes, actually. That is totally fine. All we need is some unique stream. So if that works, that's totally fine. There we go. And we don't care at all about this code. This is literally just working around the craziness in Visual Studio. So let's see if that allows us to do it. Okay, so that's total crazy town. Don't even know what that does. Like, I literally have no idea. This would be interesting. This actually kind of has me interested. I'll probably go read about this later. I didn't know that you could do these tilde things. Like normally, you know, in a thing you can put in some kind of a variable and it'll fill it in inside parentheses inside a batch file. I had no idea there was this colon tilde crazy replacement syntax. It looks like it's giving you character offsets like -4, 4, -10, 2. Like, look at all that. It looks like you're extracting. It looks like you can basically say, give me the value of this variable, and then extract this range from it, which is pretty kind of cool. I mean, MS-DOS batch files are so underwhelming in terms of what they can do. It's kind of cool when you find something where you're like, oh, I could actually use that. So basically, all I want to do here is I want to just delete the PDBs that currently exist, right? I want them to go away, and then I want to rebuild them, and I'm going to make a different name every time. And so really all I did is I say, okay, delete all the PDBs, and then use this crazy awesome string from Stack Overflow that's amazing and is absolutely nuts to just stick a thing on that's based on the time. And that way, every time I recompile, my PDB will have a different name. And so what I'm hoping is now, when I run Visual Studio, right, it's going to load that PDB file for the DLL. And if it keeps it locked, I'm hoping that that's okay, because basically now when I go in here, right, and I ask this to recompile, it will actually just recompile to a different PDB altogether, right? So when I come in here and I do this, I'm assuming that it won't touch that one. It'll just use a completely different one, and then it can repick up the old DLL, and there it goes. So I'm hoping that that is the simplest possible solution to this problem. We don't have to do any trickery. We don't have to change our DLL's name. The DLL can always be built to the same place. But basically, we just keep making new PDBs, making new PDBs, making new PDBs. And you can see that they start stacking up here, right? Every time I make a change, we'll end up with a new PDB in there because MSVC will keep them all locked in its infinitesimal wisdom. I have no idea why it's doing that. But we don't really have to care. It just means there's a little more space used on our drive for these PDBs, right? There they all are stacking up. But as soon as I end this program and we get out of here, then they will no longer be locked. So when I go to do my build again, you can see there's all the PDBs there. But when I go to do my build again, it should delete them all. And there they go. Now, it's kind of annoying to have that deletion thing show up. So I'm wondering if I can just do something to tell it to be quiet. So like don't tell me all the time when you can't delete things. So there is a -q, but I don't know if that'd actually do it. So let's find out. Let's see if there's a way to tell delete to be just a little quieter, because again, I'm just trying to figure out how to get rid of this access is denied nonsense, right? So in here, I'm going to go ahead and see. There's the PDBs. I do del star.pdb. It says access is denied. If I do /q, still says. So I don't know if there is a way to make it quiet down. Prompts for confirmation, force deleting of read-only files, delete specified files from all subdirectories. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be any way to do that. Now I have RM installed, but I don't really want to do that because I don't know if I don't think that's installed on most people's systems, unfortunately. So I don't know, we may have to live with that. I'm not sure if there's a way. What we could do is pipe it to something that we don't care about. So one of the things that you can do, obviously, in a command shell, right, is if I do del star.pdb, it prints its stuff to the thing. If I want to, I can pipe it to like foo.txt, right? And I think you can even pipe even the error stream as well. I don't know if you can do that in thing. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know if you can pipe the error stream. But basically what you can do is you can pipe the output of it to a file. So I can at least I can at least send it somewhere. And I could send it somewhere that we don't care about. Like on Unix, you pipe to a thing called dev null, which is basically just a place that eats everything. I could do something like that. But for now, I guess I'm not sure what I want to do with that. So let's just leave that for now, and we'll think about it. We'll think about that a little bit later, because I don't even remember the syntax for piping. Basically, commands from the console have two different streams. And we didn't cover this because we're not making a console app. But there's basically two different streams that console apps can write to, standard out and standard error, and they can be redirected separately. So by default, anytime it tries to write text to something called standard out, it shows up in the console. Anytime it tries to write something called standard error, it shows up in the console. But if you do something like I did where I used that little pipe syntax, so I did start.pdb, and then I try to pipe it to a text file like this little arrow here says send the output of this thing to foo.txt. When I do that, right, it sends only what's called standard out, only the output, which doesn't include standard error, which is usually what things write to when they have an error message, like access is denied. So you can see we got rid of some of the printing, but not all of it. Now, what the command is to pipe standard error, I don't even remember. I do not remember what it is. Let's see. So let me check the stream and see if anyone knows on there. So they say /null/toNull. So they were saying potentially you could do this sort of thing, right? I don't know if that actually works. Doesn't look like it though. Oh, which it's the 2 comes before, so it's this way. Okay, so there we go. So there is a way to output to pipe the different streams. So what we could do is do something like this, and you can actually do them to basically a null destination, which says just eat it entirely. I don't really want to go too far to, oops, I don't really want to, okay, thank you. I don't really want to go too far down that path necessarily, but this looks like a relatively solid thing we can do that just says get rid of that input because we don't ever care about it. But like I said, I don't want to cover batch file programming because A, I don't know it, and B, it's really only applicable to Windows. So let's go ahead and put that on the end here. So that's basically saying get rid of all those messages. And there we go. Now we have a much cleaner thing, and it just keeps on going. I wish this thing would not tell us about the performing full link because I thought that I had turned incremental off on here, but maybe I did that wrong. Is it supposed to be off or no? I'm not sure exactly why I can't seem to get it not to do that stuff. I'm going to change these to -6 so I normally do that. So I'm not sure if I could get it to stop complaining about that necessarily. Where are the common linker switches? Did I forget them? That's probably the problem. My common linker flags, oh, so it's not on there, right? This one's not, I'm not actually using the common linker flags because all of this stuff is not actually on there. So, okay, so basically I should change this. I should probably change the structure of these, but we'll deal with that a little later. So let's see what happens if I turn off incremental linking. And there we go. So that's better. That's a much more concise one, certainly. So I can live with that. That seems pretty good. And now we are able to reload in the debugger, which solves one of my problems, right? So that's better. We're getting better. We're getting closer to good. But we're still not great yet. What I'd like to do, a couple more things, but like a really simple one, is I'd like to make it so it's much more instantaneous. So again, right now, if I'm running it here, basically I come over here and I want to edit something. I'm in handmade.cpp. I want to make this change. I want it so that as soon as I hit that M, when I see it complete, I want it to change right away. I don't want to wait around for some number of seconds for that to happen. So what I'd like to do is change our platform code a little bit to make it so that we don't have that delay. And it's pretty easy to do that actually, because if you think about it, all we really need to know is whether that file changed, and checking if that file changed is actually pretty simple. Because what I can do is I can look at the date stamp on the file, because if you look, basically all files have a date stamp. It's shown right here, right? You can see all the files and when they were last touched. What I can do is I can just look at that date stamp and periodically check it checking the date stamp's really quick, so we could check the date stamp like every frame and not really have any kind of real performance penalty associated with that, just checking the date stamp of one file. So what I could do is I could check the date stamp of just the DLL. If the date stamp has changed, reload it. If it hasn't, don't. And then we would get down to just one frame of latency. Basically, like, we wouldn't even be able to see it. So I think that's the sanest thing to do. So, basically, what I was doing here may not even need to be necessary anymore either. We could think about whether it is or not. But if you remember at the end of last stream, what I did is, since I needed to rebuild the DLL, what I do every time before I load it is I copy it to a temp and I load the temp. Now, we wouldn't necessarily have to do that, I don't think. But I think I'm going to keep that in there just because it works relatively well. So I think I want to keep that in there. Okay. So we're going to do this first to-do here. We're going to do automatic determination of when updates are necessary. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to define this name here because this handmade.dll. So I'm going to actually store what the name is so that I don't use it multiple times. So basically, we're going to have the source DLL name, and that's going to be this, right? And then we're going to have the temp DLL name, and that's going to be this. And that way we don't spam strings all over the place. So we've got the source DLL name, that's here. We copy the source to the temp DLL name, and then we load the temp DLL name, right? Real simple, nothing particularly crazy going on there, pretty basic. So what I want to do now is I want to extend this code to basically say, all right, let's also, whenever we do this load, let's snap a reference, let's snap the file date. Let's just get a quick handle on how old the file is, so that later we can check against that and see if we need to reload. So I want to do win32 get file date, and we want the basically the MSDN documentation for this. So here you go. You can see it's really pretty basic. It's some of the Windows 32 file APIs are actually pretty straightforward and good. Basically, all we have to do is just pass it the handle to a file, and it'll give us back the different the creation time, the access time, and the write time. Now, my question is, I don't necessarily want to have to open the file, so I'm wondering if there's perhaps an easier way to do it than having to do it that way. I could call this, right, but you notice it takes a handle, not a path, and I don't actually want to open the file for any particular reason, so I'm worried that might incur a little bit of extra cost. So I'm thinking I might use a different API. Let's take a look here. There's a thing called find first file, which is used for searching files on a drive, basically. And I'm wondering if that may not be a faster way to do it. It's hard to tell. But basically, the way this works is you call find first file, and you give it a file name. And that file name could be a wildcard, but in this case, we wouldn't pass a wildcard. We'd just pass the actual file name. And then I'm wondering if perhaps this find data, the data that it passes back, wouldn't have what we need. Because you can see in here, it's kind of embedded in there, right? It's got the creation time, access time, and write time. Now, I don't know which of one of these would be faster. I really don't. I just think maybe not opening a file handle might be a better idea. So if I call this, so we'll just try this first, and maybe if it's a problem, we'll actually check, but we'll just try this first. We'll call find first file, excuse me, as a way to get that date. So basically what happens is this opens up a find handle, right, instead of a file handle, which is the thing that I was thinking might be a little faster. If I was to open it on the source DLL name, and then pass one of these Win32 find data structures, find data, to it, it will fill it out for me, and then I do a find close. This actually does produce a handle, which is unfortunate. Again, I wish I could do something that didn't produce any handle at all, but I don't know if there actually is anything that will get, that will actually get a file's date without doing some kind of an open. There might be somewhere, but I don't actually know. Let's take a look if any of these other guys will do it. I don't think so. I don't think there is. I think you actually got to get the name. Well, I don't know. It does not look so. Does not look so. But anyway, so I'm going to do a find close on the handle to get rid of it. Find handle. There we go. And so that should give us back the actual stuff that we wanted, the actual data that we actually need. And that is something that we can kind of wrap up here into a call that we can use to get the date of that file like every frame. So I'm going to go ahead in here and go to this find first thing. I'm going to take a look at that Win32 find data, and basically what we want is this last write time, the last time the thing was written to, right? So we want to grab that out of the result. So basically that find data dot last write time is going to be one of these file time things, and that file time thing is going to be the last write time of the file. So I can pull this out now, and I can make this a little thing, a little function that returns a file time that's called get last write time, like this. And then I can go ahead and put in there whatever the file name is that we're going to load. It'll do that. And then that will allow me, in theory, to just go ahead and get the file date every frame if I want to. I think that should work. Now, of course, that find handle, this could fail. In other words, it's not a given that it can find the file. If the file doesn't exist or something like that, then it wouldn't work. So there's a question of what we do on failure. And I think it's probably safe for us to just go ahead and return a 0 handle if that was the case. Like to just basically say, all right, if this file handle is not equal to invalid handle value, then we will go ahead and do the actual work. If not, then we will just leave the last write time as 0, because that means, you know, when I'm thinking about how this is going to work, when I ask for the last write time, let's say the file doesn't exist yet, so we haven't built the game code. Well, all I need to do is make sure that the last write time is something that when the game code does exist, it will not compare equal to it, because that will trigger us to reload it, right? So I think just passing a 0 back here should be completely sufficient. So let's assume that that's true. Now, the other thing I don't know is whether or not, assuming that this returns invalid handle value, I don't think I have to find close it. So that should be it for that. And then we go ahead and get the time out of it. Well, I guess this is a little cleaner if I actually do it this way. So that should basically be all I really need to do. And then I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll also pass the file name in here. All right. So let's go down to our Win32 load game code function, which is right here. Let's go ahead and pass the source DLL to that. And when we are going to load it, basically whenever we load it, I'm going to snap that file date into the struct that we return. So this result struct right here, where we restore everything about the game that we loaded, I'm also going to store that file time that's like the last write time for the DLL. Let's see, DLL last write time, let's say. Okay, so I'm going to update that in here. I'm going to say, okay, when we go ahead and do this load library, whenever we do that, I am going to go ahead and snap a copy to that. It won't be perfectly accurate, because in theory it could change in between these two, but that's okay. This is not code that's mission critical or anything. This is just for our own debugging purposes, so we should be fine. I will ask for the last write time right here, just using the same code that we already did. Actually, I should have used the same name here, so like that. And let's go ahead and compile that. In theory, let's see, source DLL name. We should now have something that works exactly the way that we did before. There should actually be no change when we're actually doing it. We should still be able to do our changes, but they still should be latent, so everything should still be working. There shouldn't be any bizarreness there. And there we go. But we still got that latency, so now we're in a good position to fix that latency. So now, in Win32 Handmade, we don't have to do this load counter anymore. Basically, we have a way to unload and load the game code, so all we really need to do is to figure out whether it needs to be unloaded, and we've put ourselves in a great position to do that, right? I can go to load game code here. I can use this last write time thing like this. I can say, okay, the file time is going to, of the source DLL, we're going to get that every time through the loop, like this. So this is the new DLL write time, like that. And basically I can just do if the new DLL write time, and I can't quite do a not equals, but essentially what I'm going to do is do a not equals here, where I use whatever the last write time was. What was, you know, I'm going to go ahead and move that struct. I like to keep my structs out in the H file so I can see them easier. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. That DLL write time. So this is basically what I want to do. I want to do a not equals here, but if I actually compile, you'll see that I can't do that. And the reason for that is because file time is actually a compound structure, and you can't test for not equals in a compound structure. Now, I don't know if Microsoft actually has a built-in function for comparing file times. It doesn't really matter because we could do it ourselves, but let's take a look here. Compare file time. Okay, so they've written something already that compares the file times for us, so we can just go ahead and use that, and it works on Windows XP. We're all good. So all we really need to do is say that this function will return 0 if they're equal, right? So basically, whatever happens, if compare file time like this, if we just pass it the 2 times that we want to compare, like that, assuming that it is not equal to 0, then it's time to unload and reload the code, right? Because basically what we do every time is we get whatever the current DLL is, we look at that date, and we see if that date stamp on the file is different than the one that it was the last time we load it. And if it was, then we go ahead and reload it, right? That's all we really need to do. We can make this a little more efficient in a second here and actually possibly eliminate a bug if we want to. But I don't know if we will or not. Okay, so now when we're running it, in theory it should be checking. Of course, we don't know if our code's buggy. It might be. So let's go ahead and take a look. We go in here, again doing the same green-red switch that we did before. I go ahead and hit build, and boom, instantaneous. Exactly what we wanted, right? There we go. So now we're at a position to really have that nice kind of smooth feedback of every time we edit, it's just bam, right? So that's pretty good. No real problems there. I think we've taken care of that to do pretty handily. So now we basically have to just deal with a couple other random issues before we can move on to something related, but that's slightly different. I don't know if we'll have time in the stream or not. We have a couple minutes left. We've got, what have we got? We got 22 minutes left. I don't know if that's going to be enough or not, but we'll see. So hopefully you can see how that's working. That's really pretty straightforward. We didn't do anything spectacularly interesting there. All we were doing was just getting that time. And so one of the things we could do here is avoid doing multiple of these get times, because that way we won't miss a write to the DLL was the only thing I was thinking. Excuse me. So basically what I was thinking there is in that unload load game code, if I just take load game code and I have load game code take the file time, take this thing right here, we already know that we have it anytime that we actually do that load. So we could just pass it in here and set it, right? We could just do that and not do it. And so I don't know if maybe that's a little bit better. I don't think it really is. I think it just adds a little complexity because we still could sneak a write in between. So I think it's probably fine. So basically, the problem that we have now that we have to address is, if you remember, what I did yesterday is I set this directory to be the build directory. And the reason I did that was because it needs to load the DLL, and the DLLs go in the build directory. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to leave it to where we had it before, where it's in the data directory, where all our art assets are going to be, where they need to actually load that stuff. So if I ran it now, in theory we shouldn't. Well, okay, that was rather surprising. Oh no, that actually is probably what you would expect. Okay, so basically what happens here is Windows knows to use the search path for our executable to find the DLL when we call load library. So load library succeeds, but what I would assume happened is our file date check fails, because that can't actually find the file. I'm not actually sure if that's true, but let's go ahead and see if it is. So Win32 load game code. Oops. Win32 load game code. Let's set a breakpoint and run in there. So here we are on load game code. I just want to see what happens here. So basically what happens, what I was suggesting happens is load library A, and we talked about this when we first started talking about load library. Load library A, there is a search path implicit in where it's going to look to find that DLL. And one of the places it's going to look to find a DLL is it's going to look in the same directory as our executable. So when it looks in the same directory as our executable, it will find the DLL, which means that load library will succeed. What I'm worried about, however, is that this will not, right? So when I come in here and take a look at it, and it does the find first file, you can see it fails to find the file. And the reason is because it's looking only in the current directory, which is set to whatever we set it to in here. I want to actually close this, please. How do I actually do that? Close, please. Okay, it's whatever we set it to in the Solution Explorer. So basically, this thing is what our current directory is, and that's where all files will be looked for, except DLLs, which have that magic search path. So what we need to do is make it so that we can actually find the DLL ourselves, no matter what our actual path is, so long as the DLL is in the same directory as the executable. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to ask, where is the executable? Like, where is our actual executable, so that we can look for the DLL in that path specifically. And furthermore, when we do this copy, we want to actually put the copy in the same place as the DLL was. So if I go in here, right, you can, I think, you should probably be able to see that it actually, well, no, it didn't do that. That's weird. I thought it would have done the copy to the wrong place. Oh, you know what? The copy probably just flat out failed because it probably couldn't find it. So actually, that's probably what happened. This copy probably failed as well because it could never find the source DLLM. So yeah, so both of these things don't work unless we actually have the path proper. So that's basically what we're going to have to do. We have to get that path to be proper. So what I'm going to do here is I'm basically just going to try and ask Windows where the executable is. And I think probably the easiest way to do that is to use get module file name, because I believe we can just flat out ask it where it actually is. So let me just double check to see what the EX version of that is. I'm not sure what the two different ones are. So one takes a process and a module. One takes a module. So yeah, so we can just use this one. So basically what this does is, remember those module handles I said that occasionally you actually need them? We've only used it like twice, I think. Well, here's another time we can use it. Basically, the module handle allows us to identify some piece of executable code that was loaded in Windows. We know what ours is because it's passed in. I don't know if you guys remember, in WinMain, we actually get this H instance, which is a module handle. I know it's a little deceptive, but it actually is a module handle. That's kind of antiquated, weird Windows type stuff. But that is what we could use for the module handle. And so basically when we call this, what we would be able to do is, oh, and you know what? It looks like we wouldn't even have to pass it in, because null, if we just pass a 0 there, it'll just default to using our current executable. So we don't even need to pass it. It will just do what we want it to do if we don't pass it anything at all. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how big that actually is going to be. So if we take a look, if the buffer is too small to hold the module name, the string is truncated to n-size characters, and if the function returns n-size and the function sets the last error. So it looks like if we call this function with a buffer size that's too small, it would tell us, it would basically tell us how big we need the buffer to be. That's what it seems like it's saying. So I believe if we say here get module handle with 0, and I pass it, let's say I have a buffer that we know is too small. So I just pass it, well, I don't even have to pass it a buffer, right? I could pass it, well, okay. So I have a buffer here. I could pass it the buffer pointer and just pass it 0 as a size, right? Like that. dword size of file name. Let's take a look. So, oops. What is the problem? Function does not take 3 arguments. Oh, get module handle. That's good. It's get module file name. There we go. So if I actually call that, what I want to see is if this will just tell us, if we call it with no buffer, essentially, will it then return us how big the buffer is supposed to be, so that we can just make a buffer that's the right size, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and check in our WinMain here. When we come in, let's see what it actually does, because I want to see if that's correct. Size of file name. Nope, that is not useful to us at all. So that is unhelpful. That is very unhelpful, to say the very least, because that does not allow us to actually tell what something is. Now, I suppose I could do something like this and cheese out a little bit, but what I would have liked to do is had it tell me how big it was, so that we could have done it more cleanly. Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say there. I would say, since this is debug code, again, not something that we're ever going to actually need to use in practice, I would say this is probably fine. But basically what I had to use is there's a define in Windows called max path, right? And if you take a look at what it is, it's basically a thing that tells you what the maximum number of characters is for a path in Windows for a file name, right? And I don't know if they document that in here somewhere. Oops, max path. Yeah, here you go. So it's defined to be 260 characters and so on. And the reason that I don't like it is because it's totally wrong. Like, it's not actually the max path anymore. Like you can see here, there's extended paths in certain circumstances and all this other stuff. And so really, like, max path is not right. So, you know, I'm just going to say never use max path in code that is user-facing because it can be dangerous and lead to bad results, right? Now, it's not going to produce a buffer overrun or anything here because we're still passing the size of the buffer, but it would mean that we'd get we'd get a truncated file path back potentially in the case where the size was larger than what we passed in. So I feel like it's just a good idea to not use it if you can. Now, I don't want to go through some kind of long process of trying to coax Windows into giving me the name by calling this repeatedly with bigger buffer sizes or anything like that. So I think this is for debug code. This is probably the sanest thing to do, is to just actually do it this way. But it would have been nice if Windows API had just allowed us to say, how big does the buffer need to be? And then we will give you that size buffer. But what can you do? So there you go. I'm going to do it that way. And now I'll get back a buffer. And that buffer should have the name of our executable. Now, the thing that I want to check is, does it actually have the path baked in there? I don't know if it does. So I'm going to look to see if that gives us back the path. It does look like it gives us back the path. You can see it's got the full path in there. So what I need to do now is I just need to truncate that path so that I basically have a way to build new paths with a change in the file name part. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a real simple sort of truncation where I basically go, give me wherever the last slash is in this name. So I'm just going to do a really stupid, absolutely stupid searcher. I'm going to say like this, right? As long as, okay. So I know this is null terminated because Windows is supposed to return me a null terminated string. So I can start scanning the buffer. I go through the buffer looking for a null terminators, and I stop when I get to the null terminator. And then what I'm going to say is there's a last slash. The last slash is by default going to be equal to whatever the actual last character that Windows said was there. I'm going to actually say that is where that actually is. And we'll pretend that that's the last slash. That's where we would start actually writing stuff. I guess technically we want one past the last slash in the file name. And so then what I'll do is I'll go through here, and if the character that I see is equal to a backslash, then I will say one pass slash slash equals scan plus one, right? So I'm just basically just you know, kind of quick and dirty, really simple thing to truncate the file name. I don't know if Windows actually provides one of those, but it might. So anyway, we look at one pass last slash here and take a look at where it is. You can see that basically all I did was I wrote something that just starts here, it scans through, and it looks to see wherever it found the last slash, wherever it found the last slash, and it gives me a pointer right to there. So if I wanted to just keep the path part, I now know I can overwrite that part with the new thing. All right. If you want to see that in action, we can step into it just so you can see if you've never seen stuff like that before. It's really simple. Basically what I did is this gives me back a length. So I started off by saying, well, if there's no slashes, I'm just going to assume that it's basically the null terminator is where the last slash is. Although now that I think about it, that would be wrong. That's not quite right. Really, the one, if for this purposes, if there was no slashes, then there is no path. It's just a file name. So I guess we'd just be the beginning of the buffer, right? We'd overwrite the whole thing. So yeah, because there is no path. So that's basically it. So that's actually more correct for our purposes. So we go in here. We start off and we say that one pass last slash is just the beginning of the buffer. And we've got scan, and scan is pointing to, at the outset, the beginning of the buffer. We go through and we just go through each character. Literally, you can see MSVC's incredibly long lag time for updating its watch window, which has gotten worse with every version. Speaking of things that get worse in MSVC with every version, it used to be instantaneous when you hit F10. Now it takes like a second to update the watch window. Yes, I'd just like to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that this machine, which has this many virtual processors at least in it, this many cores, I should say, is taking and you know, a monster amount of memory. The people who wrote Visual Studio could not figure out how to update this watch window in any faster time than that. Okay, so basically what I want to do here is, like I said, I'm just going through here, and anytime I hit a slash, I update one pass slash slash to point to that location. So you can see it updated here because it hit a slash, the scanner hit a slash, so it updated it. So now we write through again. We're again scanning through. You can see I'm eating characters, eating characters, eating characters. I get to a slash, and now it's time to update one past slash slash to point to just after that. There it is. And that's the last time it will update because it won't hit any more slashes, so it eats the rest of the string. When we finish, we are pointing to exactly what we wanted. So now we know that the path part of our string is between buffer and one past last slash. So if we wanted to build new ones, we could. Which means, you know, I should put this exe file name. It shouldn't be called buffer. Buffer is not a particularly good name for something, certainly. So there we go. That's a little bit cleaner for that. So we got the exe file name, and now we have that DLL name, that source DLL name. So what we can do now is we can actually start to play with this a little bit and say, okay, well, if we want to, we can use Windows to construct new strings for us that actually have these. So we can say WSPrintf, which again you've seen me use before, which is just the Windows call for doing sort of formatted I/O. I can go ahead and say, all right, what I'd like to do is print that path that we had, and then I'd like to print handmade.dll, like just append handmade.dll to it. And so that's pretty straightforward, right? All I have to do now is create something that's got the actual exe file name part in it. You know what? Maybe I should write this. I mean, this is Handmade Hero. Maybe I should write it ourselves. Should we write the string processing code ourselves? Let's write the string processing code ourselves. It doesn't look like I'm going to get to the other thing we were going to get to tonight anyway, so we might as well write the string processing code ourselves. So let's do a concatenation function, basically, right? Let's just do something that concatenates these two strings together. So I'm going to do something that's like concatenate cat strings or something like this, right? And so it's going to take source A and source A count. That's what I want to do, and then a source B count and a source B, and then a dest count and a dest, right? And I'm basically just going to write something that does the string concat myself, because why not? And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call cat strings to produce the new string. So let's say I've got something, I want to do that source DLL name, and then I want to do that temp DLL name, those two things, right? I want both of those to be there. So if I want to produce those strings, again, this is the grossest way you could possibly do string processing. If you were doing a lot of string processing, you would absolutely not do it this way. You'd actually write a little string library for your use, and then you would kind of be in something a little more convenient, you know, like you would imagine seeing in Python or something like that. But for now, since this is the only processing we have to do, I'm just going to write it this way and not go write a huge big library or something to deal with it. But basically what I want to do here is I want to basically say, all right, so one past slash minus exe file name gives me how long that path is, right? And then I want to copy exe file name from there. And then I want to also do that handmade, so I've got this handmade DLL file name, right? Or I should say game code DLL stem. I don't know what you want to call it, just the file part of that. So maybe source DLL full path and, or I should say, let's say game code DLL full path and game code DLL file name. We could do it like that, something like that. Basically, this will equal just the handmade.dll part, right? And similarly, I can do a thing where basically the temp DLL gets the same one. So there's the temp. I don't know what these should be called. I don't know. So we'll call this source game code and temp. There we go. Something like that. That should be relatively clear, right? I feel like it should be. So anyway, and this was, I think this was called underscore temp. I don't actually know what we called it, but doesn't matter. So we do the cat strings here. Then we want to do the size of this guy and source code DLL file name like that. And then we want to put it in here. So just pass that, and there we go. That's really all we need to do, I think. Nothing particularly odd there. So we want to do source with temp there. Replace that. And I think that's the correct calls. Let's double check. What did I do wrong there? Argument conversion from int64 to int. Oh, so the size ofs obviously are actually 64-bit, since this is technically a 64-bit OS. We don't really need them to be, because we're never going to have 64-bit wide strings. Okay, so then for Win32 load game code, we are now going to pass both of those things to it. Load game code. We need to pass both the source DLL name and the temp name. So those go out of there. Source DLL name and temp DLL name. That. And that should be about it. Oh, of course, these were not named that anymore. I made the super long, crazy explanatory names for them. So we got the full path here, full path, and then we've got the full path here. And there we go. So there we go. And right, and then this guy has to also ask for that. So I think that's it. Just a couple more places. Load game code needs to take both of these again. Temp game code full path. So there we go. So now all I need to do is actually write this function, because as you can see, it doesn't actually do anything quite yet, so that's no good. So basically all we have to do is we just have to copy these in there. So I'm going to do probably the worst possible implementation of this, because we don't care how fast it is, but I'm just going to go ahead and write the first thing that comes to mind. Basically what we need to do is we need to do a loop over source A count and copy it into dest count, right? So I need to do something that basically does excuse me, that basically does, you know, for int a index, or it should just say index equals source a count, right? 0, index less than source a count, index, so I'm do a loop over that guy. And while we're in there, we do dest plus equals, I guess I should say, well, we'll do that in a second. Sorry, dest equals source a plus plus, like this. So we just basically move dest along, copying in source A, and then we need to copy in source B, like this, source B, there we go. Nothing particularly useful there, we just do that, and that is the end of it, but at the very end we have to do something that looks like that to insert the null terminator, right, because all strings in C end in a null terminator, so we have to insert that null there. And so that should be basically it. Now the question is, of course, whether the null terminator already exists in these when we get the size of, I think it does. So technically, this guy, this guy right here, has to be a -1 because we don't want to copy the null terminator. We could, if we wanted to copy the null terminator, we would, but we got to get rid of that so we can just copy not the null terminator part of these so that they will concat together. And I guess technically we could have, if we wanted to be kind of weird and sly, I actually could do this. I don't think this is a particularly good idea, but you could just let it copy the null terminator out of this one so that that would end it. It's a little creepy, and I don't think that's a particularly good idea. So I'm going to say let's just not copy the null terminator now. Wouldn't matter. We'd end up with 2 null terminators, and that'd be fine. So the only thing this doesn't do now, right now, is it doesn't actually check for overflow in dest, but I think it's actually, barring stupid mistakes, which usually one does make in these particular circumstances. Let's take a look here. Let's run in there real quick. So inside our first call here, we've got source A, and we've got source B. There we go. Source A count, source B count. Looks fine to me. And then we've got our dest count and our dest. Looks fine. So we start copying in there. We go through these. We copy source A. Go through these, copy source B. We do the null termination, and out we come. We then have our temp game code DLL full path. Oops, we didn't do that one yet. It's source game code DLL full path. And hey, look, it's the path that we wanted. We do the same thing again, and it is the temp game code DLL full path as well, and that is correct. So now, in theory, this actually will work, I think. Let's take a look now and see if it did the right thing. So we are running it in the original location now. If I go into the build directory, let's take a look and see if it actually did it. So it did produce the handmade temp, or at least we think it did. Let's see if that's the right time, 8:59. Yes, that is the right time. And so now I should be able to do the stuff that we were doing before. I go in here and I change us back to our green. like this, do the build, and let's see, and it is green again. So I think we are totally good to go now. Not really particularly hard, but I got to drop a to-do in here because we ran out of time before we did dest bounds checking. And again, we don't need to check the bounds because this is debug code, but we might as well implement it properly. All right, that is the end of that. Now, I have a new system for doing questions today that I hope will work. I don't know if it will work properly or not. I'm hoping it will work properly. Let me see here. I got to get something. I have to, just for a second, quickly switch over to this machine because I forgot to set it up before I actually came on the stream here. All right, so let's go and set this up. What I tried to make something, I was having trouble keeping track of questions, so I tried to make something that would be a little bit easier for that. Okay, so you saw what we did. All we were doing today is basically cleaning up our code from yesterday to make it so that it's instantaneous now and that it works in no matter what directory we start our game in. We accomplished both of those. There's still one more thing I want to do for doing this sort of live code editing thing, but we are in really good shape now. I'm pretty actually excited about this because this is going to be probably one of the first times I've ever had this working on a game as I was developing it before. The last time I did a game was before I had really thought to do this. For some reason, it was a long time ago. It was like in 2005, so it was like 10 years ago. And since then, I hadn't really ever thought to do it. And so in a game where you're tweaking a lot of stuff, I think this is going to be pretty awesome. It seems to be working pretty well, but there's a couple other things that I want to do to it that we can do, that we'll do tomorrow. But I think we're in pretty good shape now. Everything seems to be working relatively well. So let's go ahead and go to the questions. Please put C Muratori in the question somewhere so I can see it, and please keep the questions to things that happened on today's stream or in previous streams, nothing about future streams, because we will get there when we get there. So let's take a look here. Let's take a look. Okay, so basically what I've learned is that my question thing is still not quite right. I forgot to do one part of it. Oh, terrible. All right, well, next time, tomorrow, I will remember the thing I forgot to write in my question thing. You didn't see it, but there is a shame owl going on my other computer, ladies and gentlemen. That is unfortunate. All right, questions. Let's see. How do you manage to time your coding so perfectly? I don't. I just stop coding when we run out of time, whatever the thing we're on. We've always got more things we could do. You mentioned yesterday you have something you want to address from previous days, but you never did. Yes, I've got a notebook full of things. When we're done, I want to do this because it was fun. We got some other to-dos to finish up when we are done with this. So after tomorrow, we'll go back and do some of the things that are on the notebook, just clean up stuff. You know, Thursday and Friday will basically just be cleaning up stuff in preparation for Monday of next week. I'm officially calling it done on the Win32 platform layer. So I just, you know, like I said, I just want to do something fun instead of moving right onto the game code and pretending Win32 never existed, which will be fun, but I wanted to do some fun stuff with Win32 first so that people didn't think it was all bad. It is annoying to program platform layers, it's true. Once you do it, you don't do it again, right? You do it once and you kind of like have it and you use it, but I wanted to show you that there are some cool things you can do with it. Let's see here. Will this capability be in the shipping game or will it only be for debugging? Well, we'll leave it in the shipping game probably as an option. Like we could leave it as like a minus switch, which you could say, you know, go ahead and do it. But I don't know. There's really no point in leaving it in the shipping game because in order to use it, you have to be able to build from the source code. And if you're building from the source code, then you could just turn it on yourself in the build that you use. So we really don't need to ship. The commercial executable doesn't need to be built with it on. Because if you were going to play with it, you would already be building your own DLLs. So I don't know. I don't think we need to ship it in the executable. We'll leave it in the source code, though, so anyone who starts playing around with the source code can do it. Does the reload of the DLL reset the game entirely? No, it doesn't reset it at all. In fact, you can see that. It's already true, right? I mean, watch this thing, right? Watch it run. You can see that it's got progress, right? It's going in there. And when we do this, when we rebuild, it does not miss a beat, right? Oops, I got hit yes. It does not miss a beat. It stays exactly where it was. There's no reset whatsoever, right? So the game doesn't get reset in any way. It's totally fine. And I can, if I was to do something like this, so change the state, like that's really all our game state that we have right now. You'll notice when I do that, it's exactly where it was. So there's no resetting whatsoever. We're totally live, and it just works, right? Let's see. How much time have you spent planning this game prior to even starting day one? Planning the game? Not a whole lot. I mean, I kind of thought through what I wanted to do for the game that I thought would be a game that would allow us to focus on learning to program games well. So I picked a game that would have a lot of complexity in the game code. And that was the primary part of the planning that I did. I did no planning for the code, and I will never do any planning for the code. The most I will do is if I think something takes a long time, like those compiler switches and stuff, when I did the day of compiler switches, I knew that it would just be me looking at MSDN the entire time. Sometimes I will go look at my old code and write down what the compiler switches are, just so I don't have to spend as much time doing MSDN. But I try very hard to basically never do any planning for the stream. So it's exactly as if I sat down to program that day and had to figure the stuff out right then. So I try not to do pre-pro work, because I feel like if I did pre-pro work, it wouldn't show you the real way I have to write the code. It would show you a rehearsed fake way, and I don't want the stream to be that. I want the stream to always be me doing it straight out of my head without having the benefit of the pre-warm-up. Let's see. So are you building the game in two... Wait. Let's see. Are you building the game in two sort of sections, one being core C++ section and the other being a platform-specific section? Yes. If you've been following along, you've seen us do that. Basically, we're just about done with the platform section that's for Win32. As far as prototyping is concerned, we basically finished that. And so next week, we're moving on to the game core, which we'll still touch the Win32 layer occasionally if we want to change stuff that it does. Like we're like, oh, we really want it to have passed this blah, and it doesn't pass this blah. We'll go change it. But we won't be really doing any more serious Win32 work. We'll always be doing game work from then on. Since DLLs aren't on OS X Linux, how would we handle these in those environments? They are, actually. They're not called DLLs, but both Linux and Mac OS X have dynamic libraries. All major operating systems have dynamic link libraries. So you can just do it. Beepo, did you list your qualifications in a previous stream? If not, what are they? I do not know what qualifications are. As far as I know, qualifications for programming is that you program well. And I think by watching the stream, you can tell whether I can or can't, in your opinion. So I don't know if there's any qualifications. Certainly there's a lot of people who have done a lot of programming and are still bad at it, and there's people who haven't done a lot of programming and are good at it, so I'm not sure what qualifications means as far as this is concerned. Why don't you use dynamic buffer allocation? I'm not sure what that means. We do dynamic buffer allocation. We have dynamic buffer allocation basically in, oops, that was not what I intended to do right there. Basically, if we go back to here and I do virtual alloc, oops, in Win32 Handmade, so you can see here is where we allocate our memory. So that this asks for memory. So we have two allocations currently in our code. Actually, we've got more than that because we do the bitmap as well and this read entire file. So there's a couple of places in the code where we do use dynamic allocations. You said you were going to show us how to make a game well, what are your qualifications for saying that you are making a good game code-wise? Well, I mean, I guess what I should say is I do not know of any absolute qualities of how to certify that a game was coded well. So I can only give you what I consider to be game code that is architected cleanly. Hopefully, as we go, you will see that there is good stuff. Like, we've already kind of done some things that I would say illustrate that even though we haven't even started the game architecture yet, you can also see that there's been good decisions that are made, and we'll see some more of that tomorrow, actually. But for example, how easy it was to do the dynamic code loading, a lot of that was because I already did the game architecture correctly. Like, I showed you how to make the game architecture just in the place where it interfaces the platform layer to be correct. And in so doing, it was trivial for us to make the code load dynamically. We didn't have to do a lot of crazy stuff to connect it up and back. And because we did the memory properly, unloading it and loading it just works there as well. So we're going to see tomorrow, there's a bunch of other decisions I baked in here that I'm going to talk about, because I basically can't talk about decisions that I make until I show you why they're important. So I talk about decisions at the time when I can actually show you the reasons why they were good. And so hopefully it's very self-evident as we go why a lot of these decisions are important and why they're correct. But if they're not obvious to you, you can always feel free to ask a question, and I will try to explain why it was a proper decision to make, or why it was at least a good decision. Some decisions are not about right or wrong. They're about whether or not you're prioritizing certain things. And so I'll always try to be very clear to you about whether something was a decision that's a 6 of one, half dozen of the other, or whether it was a decision that was like, oh, you really should do it this way because if you do it the other way, it's going to be bad. Could you explain your method of compressed programming somewhere in writing on the forum, maybe? Yes, actually, I could. Oh, it looks like someone already posted the link. So there's an entire blog post about that. If you go to mollyrocket.com/Casey, my blog is on here. And there's this long series of working on the witness articles where I talk about all the stuff that I was working on the witness. This first one was a pretty popular one where I talk about doing some stuff to test the movement code. I've got more of those articles that have been coming out hopefully early next year that are talking about the final collision system that I did on the witness, which I think is actually pretty cool, but it's very odd. Anyway, on here, I believe there's a series that starts, I think it's on 11. So basically, this working on the witness part 11, from here on is all about that programming style, that semantic compression programming style, where you kind of go through and you can see there's a bunch of articles on it. They go all the way through 15, 16, 17, 18, and even post the source code to it. So yeah, you can go through those if you want to read about that style of programming. So that's good. When find first file is called, does Windows actually read anything from the disk, or is file system meta stuff kept in RAM? Usually it's kept in RAM. So it shouldn't have to actually hit the disk to answer that. Maybe the first time it does, like on startup, if that was cold, but it should be, after that it's cached, so it should be fine. And it shouldn't cost us anything. One way to abuse the fact the game code is in a different DLL is to do a Doom 3 style release where the DLL part is open for modders and modding tools. Well, just to point out though, this game comes with the full source code. So modding isn't really a concern that we have because basically people will be able to ship their own executables, right? So basically you'll be able to just like, here's a new executable. I'll try to do something when we actually ship the game that basically says the game and its content are copyrighted, but anyone who buys the game has the right to send executables or post executables for the game, just the executable or something like that, so that people can trade their own executables if they want to. So we'll figure something out. I don't know how we'll do it, but we'll figure something out so that basically the same sort of stuff is possible with the modding. Let's see. One common theme in these videos is that you shouldn't clean up OS objects or memory on shutdown, but OS objects will presumably need to be cleaned up on DLL reload, correct? No. So basically our DLL doesn't talk to the operating system, and that's a crucial thing to understand. The DLL is our game code. So it does not have the ability to, nor will we ever give it the ability to, handle operating system objects. So there will be no cleanup on close and reload, if that makes sense. Not seeing any other questions. Were there any questions that I missed? I don't think so. I wish you had a subscriber button. This is awesome. Are we in Q&A time right now or still coding? We are in Q&A time. I do have, so I talked to Twitch about becoming a partner, and unfortunately I can't sign the contract that they have because their contract says that content has to be exclusive to Twitch for 24 hours, and I upload the videos to YouTube immediately so people can follow along with them. So I couldn't sign the partner contract. Just because of the way Twitch does things, so I can't put a subscriber button on. So I apologize for people who want a subscriber button. I can't do that. But I did. There is, if you go to handmadehero.org, if you just want to contribute to the series, there's a Patreon link. A lot of people were asking for this. If you go there, there's a way that you can sign up to just pledge something for every month that I output the video series. So if you're looking for a way to support the series, you still can do it. To subscribe to the series, basically, you still can do it. But I'm sorry, I apologize to people who want the subscription button. I can't do that because basically I want the videos have to be in a permanent location. So they can't just exist on Twitch because Twitch clears them after 60 days or something like that. So I have to have a permanent location where people can go to get the videos, and so that the episode guide, which works off of YouTube, can and off of a permanent location can be there. And I don't want to delay posting to YouTube for a day because there's a lot of people who work on it like within just a couple hours of being posted. So I just made the judgment call that I felt like, I mean, it's not, I don't think Twitch generates a lot of revenue for a stream like this one or anything anyway. So I felt like it was just like, it didn't really matter that much, and I'd rather give people the files as soon as possible. That just seemed like a saner decision. So again, I apologize to people who wanted a subscribe button. I felt like it was easier to just do it this way and have a separate place where you could donate. So that's what ended up happening. Let's see. Firefly says, are we going to see the process of designing the game too, as in the game concept rather than the code? No. And the reason for that is not because I don't want to show it, but it's actually just because I am not really a game designer. So the process of designing the game, I don't feel like... I don't want to present the game designing part of this series as being an educational thing, because I don't really want people to learn their game design skills from me. I think you want to learn your game design skills from like John or someone else who's like a really great game designer who's designed a lot of great games. I am specifically selecting the game design for this game to be about what we can do that creates a lot of code complexity. And so I want the game to be driven by how do we add that complexity in that forces us to do good work in the code. And that is really the direction that we're going with that, because that's something that I feel qualified to do. Whereas if this stream were about designing a game, I feel like you would want someone... I mean, I have 30 years of experience programming. I have hardly any experience designing games, right? So I feel like it would just be a bad idea to go, the point of the stream is to design a great game and let's focus on designing the game, because I just don't feel like I have the kind of experience necessary to do that. I may luck into it, or I may be able to design a good game here just because I have a lot of experience with games, and the game design is not crazy far out there. It's not like we're designing some new kind of genre or whatever. So the game design may go well, and I hope it goes well. But even if it does, I'm able to explain code coherently, I think, because I have so much experience. I wouldn't be able to explain design in that same way because I'm not a great game designer. I don't have that background. And so a lot of what I would say might be wrong. Like, even if the game design is good, I may not explain it in a way that allows you to do good game design, right? And so I really feel like this stream needs to not be about that. The stream is strictly about programming, and hopefully someday, maybe if this series proves to be popular, which it has been so far, you know, maybe someday there can be another type of stream that's by somebody else who is a great game designer who will do the equivalent of Handmade Hero but for design, right? I can only hope that that's true. I think I would learn a lot from that stream. And so I don't know. So yeah, so all I can say is we are, for this game, I'm intentionally picking something that is not like a genre redefining kind of game design, so that it can be relatively straightforward in its core. And then I'm just driving the design off of trying to make the world and the items in the world and the monsters in the world and how you interact with them very complicated in terms of the possibilities of what can happen, so that we will have to really do a good job improving our game core to support all that. So that is where the game design comes from. Can you give some examples of some types of code changes to the game DLL that won't work well with hot reloading? Yes. So changes to the code will always work. Changes to the data layout will not. So basically, if we change a struct to reorder the parameters, it won't work anymore, right? Because the memory is static. We load new code, it's looking for the members of the struct in different places, and it will fail because it will get totally garbage, right? There are things we can do that will improve that ability to make it so that it could work across those changes in certain circumstances, depending on how much of a change you make. But I don't know that we care about that, so I may not do those things. I don't know how much we will care. We'll have to drive that decision based on what we see happening. If it turns out that it proves to be a problem, and a lot of times we would like to be able to have more flexibility there, we can go, it's actually a fairly heavyweight thing that has to happen in order to make that work okay. So basically we could think about that, and we could then at that point say, all right, we're gonna spend a month of time, because that's probably how long it would take, given that I only get an hour a night and I have to explain everything. It would probably take a while. It's probably a week's worth of work, normally, let's say. So it would take a long time for me to do that on stream. So I'd rather not do it if we don't have to. But if it turns out that that's something that really looks like it needs to happen, then it can happen. Let's see. What else we got on here? Can I scroll back? I can't scroll back. Don't got no mouse. I got to plug in a mouse to this laptop so I can scroll back. Any other questions? Do we have any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left for Q&A. Do you have any opinion on Lua, such as using it for configuration or more comprehensive scripting? So I guess what I would say is, as I talked about last night, I don't understand what the value add of Lua is. You can dynamically load C, and C is way more powerful than Lua, and it has that you can use the same debugger integrated all together. I don't know why anyone uses Lua. I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's a bad idea to use Lua. I'm just saying I don't understand the decision. The decision seems very odd to me, because I don't understand what you perceive to be getting by using Lua. It seems like all you did was make the language that you write your game code in be worse than it was before. It's like a downgrade switching to Lua. So yeah, so I don't want to flat out say don't use Lua, because I don't know, maybe there's something that people are getting from it that they like. But from my perspective, hot loading C is superior to Lua in all possible ways. And if for some reason you thought there was something you needed out of Lua, I would say really think about whether that's true and whether you can really say for sure that it's true. Because like I said, even if you wanted to make it so that you could hot load C across data layout changes, you can do that. And if this were a game where I was programming at full speed 40 hours a week, I'd just do them. they'd take, like I said, take me maybe a week to do. It's not a big deal. And then you're just done. Do you think this method of hot reloading can be useful for developing other types of software besides a game? Like, for example, a mobile app or business system? Well, I don't know. I don't develop mobile apps or business systems. It depends. Basically, it depends on how long it takes you to get from starting the app to the thing you want to tweak. That's what this really does. Is it cuts down that iteration time, because now you can just edit the code live. If you're spending a lot of time like shutting down, restarting the app every time you make a code change, then yes, this could help you. If you're not, then it doesn't really do anything for you. So I don't know. It's a case-by-case basis. You'd have to look and see if you thought that was true. Do you think there's a case for DSLs in some cases instead of using C for the code, like for AI? Not really, because I think there's domain-specific languages are only useful if they're more powerful and expressive than C. And so what I would say is, why don't you just make your C be that expressive? Like, write the stuff that you're doing in C be that expressive. Now, there are a bunch of things that I wish C would improve on, right? There's tons of things I would do that would improve C. And John Blow right now is working on his new version that doesn't, like, he's doing that, right? And so what I would say is, if you were going to do a domain-specific language for your AI system, why think about it that way? Think about what's wrong with C that you don't think you can write your AI in it, and just improve C to have those things, right? Because all that time that you spend, just make a C preprocessor that outputs C, because then now you can use it for everything. Like, why don't you want that power everywhere? And so I don't think domain-specific languages are typically very good. I think you should just focus on what are the things you can't do in your language, and if you're going to spend time making a new language, just make that be the thing you actually program in, you know? Panic says, one benefit of Lua is that you don't have to recompile at all, but neither do we really. Like, I mean, I hit Alt-M and it changes. So it's basically like I could just bind the save key to also recompile, and we wouldn't know the difference between that, right? I guess on people whose compile times are really huge, then that's true, but. Will the game engine be mostly generic or tailored for this game? Well, tailored for this game, obviously. Yeah, it will be. It'll support all the things that you need to support for this game. It's not going to be like trying to be like Unity or something that's like kind of an everything engine. Let's see. Any more on-topic questions? I don't think there are any more on-topic questions. So I might switch to off-topic questions. So people are asking about Larrabee and Xenon Phi, or Phi. I don't know how you pronounce that. So they're the same thing, obviously. The Larrabee project is what turned into the Xenon Phi, or Phi, however you want to say that. So basically, I don't think I'm really allowed to talk too much about that project because I was on that project. So I probably shouldn't talk about Larrabee and Xenon Phi. All I will say is I would have preferred it if that is the way graphics cards had gone permanently. I would have preferred it if graphics cards were just programmable CPUs that just had a lot of in-order cores on them. So. Do I recommend C over C++? No. I recommend using a few features of C++. Basically, I don't like most of the features of C++, but there are a couple that I like operator overloading and function overloading. So I feel like it's worth it usually to use C++ and just use it lightly. Because basically, when a lot of times I will, or other people who are specifically kind of program in the way that people who program in the same style that I do often are disparaging of C++. What we're disparaging of when we say C++ is bad is really that the way people use it is bad. And the way people use it is bad, and the language committee, the changes that they make to C, the way that they've made improvements to the language have been poorly thought out and poorly executed, right? So we're not trying to say that C is better than C++, because C is really mostly a subset of C++. So it's usually better to use C++ and then just not use a lot of its poorly thought out features, just ignore them, because you can still use the ones that do work, right? And so usually the reason that we're so disparaging of C++ is because we wish that the people who had designed C++ had had a clue. Because if those people had a clue, we would have had 30 years of great modifications to C, and C would be an amazing language today. Instead, what we got is mostly very poorly thought out, oftentimes almost unusably bad feature additions. And as a result, most C++ programs are a mess because people try to use those features in the way they were intended, and they end up with code that's worse than if they had never used the features at all. What's worse is most people don't realize this is true. They think that they've made progress, but really their code compiles slower, runs slower, is harder to read, has more bugs, is more lines of code. Like, everything is worse about it than if they'd just done the equivalent without the C++ feature. And so that's really where all the anger and the vitriol comes from, I think. Speaking for myself, I don't know if I can speak for other people who don't like C++. That's really where it comes from, is it's the missed potential. We basically had a lot of people who didn't know how to do good language design iterating on C. That's what produced C++. If instead we had had great language designers who had done C++ instead of C, we would have had an amazing language today. And again, that's the thing that John Blow is trying to rectify right now. I highly recommend watching his stream, Naysayer88. He is like the one person right now who's actually working on trying to build a better C, and I really hope that he succeeds because we could really use it. And I think already his language is better than C++ is, even though C++ had 30 years of improvement. So yeah, I'm pretty hopeful. Let's see. As a beginning programmer, is Unity a good start to develop some basic games? I don't know. I've never used Unity. Probably. I mean, if you just want to make games and you don't care about programming, then yeah, maybe just Unity or Unreal 4 or one of those other game maker. There's a lot of tools out there that you can use to just play around with making a game. If you care about programming and learning to program, I don't know how useful those tools are because they obfuscate the programming and what actually happens to a large extent, and they may not be so good for that. So it depends on what your goals are, is what I would say. You complain a lot about the Windows API, but clearly other platforms aren't any better. That is true. I do not think other platforms are better. What would your ideal general purpose platform look like? That's too big of a topic. I mean, there's just so much to discuss there. Sorry, it's a good question, it's too big. Were there any personal projects that you had done prior to graduating high school or college that came in handy when looking for a job? How did you come to work at RAD? You can actually, all of that is on, if you go to the video archive and you want to know the answer to that question, if you go to the video archive on videos all the way back, well, actually, you know what? Don't do that. Don't do what I just said. Instead, click on News and Forums. I should probably update that video archive. Go to Episode Guide. And on Episode Guide, click on this, I think it's Intro to C on Windows Day 5. Because this is the thing that has the time jumps in it. I'm pretty sure it was in here. Was it in here? Oh, no, you know what? It was in the Q&A. So the Q&A for Day 5, I think. Is that it? Let's see if it's down here. Yeah, okay. So if you scroll down here, you can see that they've actually, the awesome people who do the Handmade Hero episode guide, you can go, which by the way, if you go to this thanks page, you can read a bunch of the people who are responsible for all this awesome stuff. Anyway, if you go on here, you can jump to basically what's your life story, how did you learn programming, and there's just, honestly, it's like seriously a 30-minute thing that just tells you everything about that. So if you want to see that, it's recorded on there, and it basically says what happened to me. Do you think games can make use of concurrency and parallelism more than it is right now? Well, yes and no. I mean, a lot of game engines now are getting pretty parallel. So I don't know. It depends on that depends on what specific game you mean, right? Like some games don't use it at all, and some games use it to a large extent. So, you know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Where can I find the song used in the YouTube trailer? Well, I don't know if you can. Basically, it's a piece of music. I licensed music for the game, and it's a piece of music that comes with the license library that I did. And so I don't know. I don't know if you can get the song as just a song that you buy. I don't think it's like on iTunes or anything. So I'm sorry. I don't know if there's anything you can do there. Can you show how to set key bindings in Emacs? Sure. If you go in, well, I'm going to load mine, but wherever yours is, mine's in the MISC directory here. If you go in there, there's basically like a bunch of lines you can see that look like this define key global map thing. And basically what you do is you put the key binding in here and then the function you want to call in here. And whack E, that like \E, just means alt. So if you want to do alt, you put that. You can also see like if you scan through here, you can see the syntax in other places like \C is like for the control and for control key and stuff. There's also, this is an alternate syntax where you do bracket C dash a thing. I don't know. I don't know Emacs Lisp at all. So this is just like what worked for me to be able to bind the file. You know, I don't even know if that's a good way to do it. And you can see I have some keys bound in C++ mode and other keys bound in the global mode. So you can set them, what you put in here for global map or C++ map is just telling you like, oh, this is when that key binding works, whether it's always or just in C++. What do I think of Blizzard as a game development company? I have no idea. I've never worked for Blizzard. Never worked for Blizzard, never even visited the offices. I know some people who worked there, but they worked there a long time ago. Like Pat Wyatt's a friend of mine. Great guy, started ArenaNet. Same with Jeff Strain. I know those guys, they're great guys. If the rest of Blizzard's like them, it's probably great. I don't know. Yeah, they went on to do like ArenaNet, and then they did Undead Labs, which is also here in Seattle. ArenaNet's across the water in Bellevue. But basically, those guys are great, and they're really good at what they do. And so I don't know if the rest of Blizzard's like them, or if they were the good people at Blizzard and they left, and now it's not. I don't know. But my only experience really with Blizzard people was knowing them from way back when, and they're awesome people. So I don't know. Yeah, if the rest of Blizzard's like them, then it'd be awesome. If it's not, then I don't know. Perhaps this question is better suited for the forums. What guidance can you provide for newbie game developers looking to find artists for their game projects? Make money first. As far as I know, like finding good artists involves paying for them. If you happen to luck out and you're friends with someone who's a really good artist and you want to go work on a game together, that's great. But if you just want to like work with a good artist, you need to pay them. So you've got to have money. Get funding is really the way to do it. And if not, then you're gonna have to befriend someone first. So it's tricky. You mentioned on stream metaprogramming in C. What does that look like? Been dying to know. Well, this is since we're in off-topic land. I mean, it's really simple. All metaprogramming in C means is that you write a C program that writes a C program. So, if you wanted to do it, you open up metaprogramming.cpp, right? And you have something that looks, like this or whatever. And you just output C code. You're like, hey, I don't know, this is my C file, and I do an fopen, and it's like out.cpp, right? And I do write, and then I do, fprintf, C file, int main, int argc, char star star argv, \n, right? You know what I'm saying to you? This is all I'm talking about. That's metaprogramming. Metaprogramming is just writing a program that outputs a program. And That's it. That's all I'm talking about. So the way that I do things nowadays is most of my code gets outputted, well, not most, but a fair degree of code, let's say 50%, something like that, gets outputted by a program that outputs programs. And the reason I do that is because C just doesn't have a lot of features that I need, and so what I do is I implement those features in the meta program so that I can output C code, and I use C code sort of as like my output language. That's all it is. That's all I'm talking about. And so basically now, once you have your program being output by another program, you can use control flow and do all the stuff you want to do. And obviously it doesn't end up looking like this. You've got helper functions that output functions and all that sort of stuff. But basically this is all I'm talking about, right? So let me delete that file. That's it. There's no magic to it. You just write a program that spits out a program, and you compile that program and run it. Ambiguous Panda, you mentioned that you don't think you will make much of a profit from becoming a Twitch partner, but you get 7x more viewers than some of the full-time streamers. So the reason is because the stream's just not on that long. And also, I'm not going to put ads in the stream. This is supposed to be educational, and I'm doing this to teach people. I'm not going to start like triggering ads every 15 minutes or something, right? And so the way that it works, I mean, Twitch is a TV station basically, and so the way that it works, just like everything else, is you get paid by when people watch ads, and then if people subscribe, you get something. I don't know, you get 50% of that or something like this. But I mean, how many subscribers, are you probably going to get? So it just, economically speaking, I don't think that it's something that's worth compromising the uploading of the videos, which it has a real tangible educational value to people who are trying to keep up with the stream. So I just didn't feel like the money was worth it. If they were like, you can have $100 million, and if you just don't upload the videos for 24 hours, I'd be like, okay. Because we can probably do some really good stuff with $100 million. But on the whole, I just didn't feel like this stream was going to generate that kind of revenue that would make it so that the good stuff we did with it would outweigh the bad of having to hold the files. Just a judgment call, like I said. I prioritized people having a stable location for archive files that's up right away. I prioritize that over whatever the incremental revenue would be from the Twitch stream. That's the best way to say it. And I don't want this to be a slight on Twitch in any way. Their contracts are their contracts, and they're trying to run a business. So I'm not trying to say that this is bad. I just couldn't sign their contract, and so that was just how it went. I mean, obviously Twitch is a good service. You've been watching this show on it for many nights now, and it has never gone down. And the one time we had a problem was because my internet service provider died. So Telegraph Cable says, sorry if I missed it, but did you fix that expected bytes until flip bug in the audio code? No. Like I said, I've got a notebook of a couple things we got to clean up. So we haven't done any cleanup of the code. We've just been implementing this new kind of dynamic reload thing. So when we're done with the dynamic reload, we'll clean up that. And there's a couple other things I have written down in my notebook that are, I don't know if that may be the only bug, but there's other things that I'd written down that should be cleaned up. And so we'll clean those up in a couple days. Can you make a lot of money by C programming? Yes. I made all of my money by C programming. I've supported myself since I was maybe 19, 20. I supported myself through C programming, and it pays very well, at least currently. Yeah, I mean, I have never felt that I couldn't earn a very good salary C programming. It has always been true. And the other thing that I would mention is if you know low-level programming, like the kind that we're sort of going towards on this stream, there's hardly anyone in your job market. Like, you are alone. Like, basically, you can go work at any company, any high-end company you want to, if you know how to do low-level game programming, because there are so few people who actually know how to do it. Like, most people only know how to do like the high-level programming. So like at any given time, tons of companies out there, big name companies, wish they had more developers who knew really good low-level C code, coder kinds of people. So I've never seen a case where a great engine programmer was out of work. I've never even heard of it. Maybe it happens, but I've never heard of that. Usually the times when people are out of work programming wise is because they don't have those special skills. They're just a generic high level programmer, and those are actually very easy to find. It's very easy to go find a person who could program in a high level simple language to do basic kinds of programming stuff. But people who can write their own rasterizer, I just don't know of a time when people who can do those kinds of things can't go get a job. So, and maybe that's changing. I don't know. Maybe that's not true anymore, but that's been the case in my life anyway. Let's see. Do you use hot reloading in any of your non-game projects? Yes, but I can't talk about those yet because they're not announced. Why do you think so few people learn this stuff? Well, two reasons. One, I'm trying to fix with Handmade Hero, which is that I think people don't know how to get to the point where they can work on low-level code. Like, I don't think they have a good intro. And so the idea behind Handmade Hero is that if you can spare an hour or two a night for a year, like you would if you were going to a college course, then you will be able to see the entire process of how to do that low-level code. And I feel like I'm trying to solve that one part of it. The second part of it is a motivational issue. I think what happens is people go, oh, I can just go download Unity and start making a game, right? And it's a lot faster to make a game in Unity because so much code has already been written for you. And so using code that's already written for you is always faster to get started than writing code from scratch. Now, what's kind of odd is sometimes it actually turns out to not actually be faster overall because you have to fight that already written code all the time when it doesn't do what you want. So depending on whether you happen to do a Unity game that's exactly like some other Unity game that already works and kind of had Unity built around it, or whether you're doing something totally new and you have to write a lot of code yourself may make that determination. But either way, in general, having a game engine means a lot of code was already written for you, and just using it's a lot simpler. So people often don't want to invest the time to learn how to do the low-level code. So what that means is basically you will get, I think in the future, a lot of people who can work within the confines of an existing engine, but cannot extend that engine effectively. That's a bummer because I think game engines have a long way to go before they're really great. So I think we need a lot more engine programmers than we have. I think we need a lot more Unities. Like, I don't want Unity to be the only game engine. I don't want Unreal 4 to be the only game engine. We need a lot of good game engines, and we need them to be competing so that we can have a lot of progress in what a game engine is, how it works, what it's capable of. Because I think we've only just scratched the surface, really. So I think we need that. But there's another side to that coin, which is, and I can say this definitively because I do play a ton of indie games built in Unity. I play a ton of them because I do judging for Indie Mega Booth, and I'm interested in indie games. I like indie games, and I like as much as I want people to be low-level programmers, I like the fact that Unity allows people who maybe would never invest the time to become a game programmer at a low level and build their own engine. I like the fact that it allows them to make games, because maybe there are people who will be great game designers, don't have maybe what it takes to be a low-level game designer, but do have what it takes to be a great game designer, for example. Unity empowers those people to do that game design and so on. So I think Unity actually does a really good public service in some sense and makes a good business out of it, certainly, by filling that gap. But there's a real big downside there. And that is that a lot of games I see, Unity games I see, the controls are awful. Like, you play a platformer and it just plays terribly. And the reason for that is because the person who made the game just doesn't know enough about game code to make a really great feeling wall jump, or a really great feeling rocket boost, or that impact, or what a gun should feel like to fire, or what it should feel like to do X, right? And so programming and understanding like how to program your own physics stuff and how to program is really very important, even if you're using someone else's engine, because we haven't gotten to the point yet where the engines make it foolproof for you to make a good feeling game. Now maybe someday we will, And that's like a very important avenue of game engine development. And I'm sure that's the kind of thing that Unity people are probably working on. And I hope they succeed in making tools that make it easier for you to do those things. But for now, I feel like even people who use an engine or existing libraries need to know their stuff. And they don't need to know all the stuff that I'm learning on, that I'm trying to teach on this stream about like how to like concatenate your own strings and how to rasterize your own sprites. But they do need to learn some of this stuff. And so, I hope that there becomes more of a trend of people sort of showing how to do that kind of programming so that games don't end up being bad for the reason that the people making them didn't know how to write the code right. I mean, I literally cannot tell you how many Unity-based platformers I have played that feel awful. It is dozens, right? And those platformers may have been great. Like, the platformer may have actually been a good design that was interesting to play, but you just don't want to play it because it feels awful and the jump feels awful. Like, that happens all the time. And so there are consequences to people not knowing how to do some of this coding. And so I feel like there's a sort of flip side to it too. All right, so any more questions? I think my voice is just about shot, so. I know some of your friends went to ArenaNet, but I can't stress how much Guild Wars 2 feels awful. They didn't do Guild Wars 2. They left. So the friends of mine who I was talking about, they founded ArenaNet, made Guild Wars 1, and then left because of political reasons when the company got acquired. So do not worry, you are not insulting them by saying Guild Wars 2 was bad. All right. I think I'm going to call it here, because I need to save some voice, because again, we'll be programming tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Handmade Hero. I'm going to go ahead and close everything down here. Basically, if you enjoyed tonight's episode and you would like to support the series, you have ways of doing that on handmadehero.org. There is a Patreon you can click on if you'd like to just support the video series, but also, if you'd like to pre-order the game, you can do that right here, and that comes with some benefits. You can download the source code every night, and you will actually be able to get builds of the game as well once we have the full game running. So this is like a basically complete access to everything, and you can download every night after I finish the stream. You can download the source code, and it has all of the source code from the previous days as well, so if you go back and do other things, you can do that. So yeah, if you'd like to support the series, you've got ways of doing it, and I appreciate that. Also, we've put up a site. If you click on that news and forums link, if you click on this link right here, we've put up a site that basically has like a forum. You can click on code discussion, and there's a forum in here that people can discuss things, help each other out, talk about things they've done with Handmade Hero. There's also, if you just click on the main link, the Handmade Hero Central link, it's got the schedule for each week if you want to know ahead of time. And also, it's got this great episode guide thing. Well, actually, there's two great things. This episode guide thing is basically a thing that community members have put together where I showed it a little bit in the stream today, where you can go click on things and there's like time markers, so you can jump to anything that you want to learn about if you want to go back and reference it. So that's pretty awesome. And this coding resource page has some awesome stuff on it too. People have ported Handmade Hero already to Mac OS X and SDL. There's a bunch of stuff like that on here. We've also had people have talked about how to use other editors. And we've got weekly illustrated summaries. These are pretty cool. Iker Murga does these ones where he does little illustrations of what happens every week. So there's just a ton of stuff here that you can check out. And there's also a thanks page where all the people who have made this possible, they come on here, so you can thank them if you see them online. So that's all the stuff for Handmade Hero. I hope to see you here tomorrow at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then Thursday and Friday we will be on holiday hours because we're getting close to Christmas here. So Thursday and Friday we will be 11 a.m. We'll be in the morning. So some of you might not be able to make it, but some of you from Europe may be able to make it. So hopefully we'll see some new faces there on the Twitch stream as well. Thank you very much for joining me. It has been a pleasure coding with you as always, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks everyone.